Welcome, friends. It's Sega Saturn month here at the Sega Guys, and to celebrate 30 years of our favourite console, this is the first of three special podcasts. Not that we need that much of an excuse to talk about the Sega Saturn anyway. I'm Dan the Mega Driver, and with me is my longtime friend and co-host, the Saru to my Fenrir, James the Takeaholic. How you doing, mate?
I'm very good, mate. Very good. How's yourself?
Yeah, not too bad, mate. Not too bad. Feeling a bit bloated. It's time of recording. It's All Hallows Eve. Halloween tomorrow. Spent the day carving pumpkins, making all sorts of Halloween treats, biscuits, pies, soups. And to be honest, I've eaten too many of them. You know, you and the kids cook it. You've got to sample it, haven't you?
That's it, mate. It's part of the course. You know, you've got to sample the goods. No, I mean,
Exactly.
you've got to make sure they taste all right. You know, just
It's rude not to. Rude not to. But yeah, I think I've overindulged. So I think as soon as we finish recording, I'm going to be taking a nap. But how about yourself, mate?
very good, mate. It's just usual, working away, trying to catch up on sleep where possible. You know, wee one's almost 4 months old now, so you know it's time is flying as we.
Fine, mate.
You know, we're, as you say, we're heading to kind of Halloween tomorrow, then it'll be bonfire night next week, then it's a countdown to Christmas, and just another year is gone, and then that'll be us heading into our fifth calendar year of doing this very show. Where the hell is that gone? You know what I mean? So,
I know it's scary as well when you think about that. We've got every show until the end of the year mapped out now. You know, when we
yeah.
after record the next two, everything else will be for for 2015, 2025.
I wish it was 2015, mate, I'm telling you.
Yeah.
Could do with knocking 9 years off my age. That'd be very nice. Thanks very much.
Yeah. Back when this back pain wasn't there as much.
Aye. Back when you didn't groan just getting up out of a chair or bending over to pick up a pen that you've dropped. You know, it's like,
Oh, mate.
better days, mate, better days. But hey, we're still here talking about Sega, so that's the main thing.
I know, and you know, speaking of old hardware in need of care, you know, the premise of this episode.
In case you're wondering.
So, the premise of this episode is obviously the Sega Saturn as of this month, or next month at the time of recording, but this month when you see this, the Sega Saturn is 30 years old, which it blows my mind that it's 30 years old. That is impressive, but these machines can, and well, they are dying. You know, it's no secret that there's things going wrong with them. So this episode is all about saving our Saturns. Now, this came off a discussion. This came off of an article Nick, aka Pandemonium, wrote for Shiro. They talked about it on Shiro. We were hoping to get some of the Shiro guys on, weren't we, mate? But the stars didn't quite align for that one.
The stars didn't align. No, the alarm didn't go off, mate. Because and right, we'll just full disclosure. You've hung me halfway here, so we'll just basically I slept in, folks. There you go. Made to record at 5:30 in the morning, and I woke up at like 6:45 with my alarm screen showing but no sound, and missed calls from Dan. So there we go. So
That's all right.
you don't have Pat. It's just us. Sorry.
Yeah, it's. I mean, me and Pat had a nice little chat for an hour anyway. Not something that we ended up recording, but just had a little
Oh,
gas. But no, it's fine. The thing about us, mate, is we adapt. You know, that was Plan A, but there's always a Plan B.
love when a plan comes together.
So yeah, we were going to be talking about saving Sega Saturns, making sure that they can live on in their various guises, and how not to save your Sega Saturns. And I think that was where we were thinking of starting off, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think obviously myself and Trekkies kind of weighed in on the Shiro show during the kind of news roundup where Nick's article was mentioned. So I think we felt that our audience and our kind of followers would want or be interested in that kind of discussion, but on a kind of more in-depth kind of basis, and maybe try and educate and inform as to ways you can, preserve your Saturn. If you're looking to get into Sega Saturn, ways that you can do it by using real hardware and not going near these, AliExpress machines, which we will talk about more in due course. But yeah, just hopefully, just to kind of let people know that there are lots of options out there, to get these machines maintained and back up and running, full pelt again.
Yeah, and the thing is, show is obviously is a Sega Saturn focused show, Sega Saturn focused community, whereas people can watch us if they're fans of the Mega Drive, Dreamcast, Master System. So it may be that you're watching us right now and you don't actually own a Sega Saturn, and we're planning on picking one up. And I think we're going to tackle this in two aspects: the Saru Saturns that are currently being sold on AliExpress, and then sort of the stuff that you can do to maintain your own Sega Saturn and tips for maybe picking one up. So if you're thinking of picking up a Sega Saturn, then and you've seen these AliExpress Saturns that you may think that they look like kind of funky and compact, but yeah, the point on those is that they may not be as good value as they first seem to be. And I think there's a few. You were looking at AliExpress before we jumped on, weren't we, mate? And what they're hovering at now, I think they're around. They've gone down a little bit, but I still see them around 120 to about 180 pounds.
Yeah, so it depends as well on the shell because they have these custom shells as well. So it's like you can get like for some reason there's like Metal Gear Solid 3 themed ones. It's like I don't understand why that's the case, but they do various kind of versions of it. You can get standard colors, white, black, grey, pink buttons, green buttons, purple buttons on it, but they all have that same, you know, square look with the kind of transparent lid on it, that you can see the innards, you can see the poor motherboard of the Saturn being held captive. Like I likened it to the scene in RoboCop, the reboot, whenever like Murphy gets everything stripped away, he asks, "Show me what's left," and it's like an arm, a lung, and then his head, and it's like he's living inside this artificial body for the rest of his days. That kind of that kind of resonated with me that that's what these Saturns are doing. But looking just now, if you're wanting just a basic standard color, they're £113 just now. You've got the Evangelion Asuka, themed one, which is red with yellow buttons with artwork on the top of it. If you can see it there, that's it there.
Yeah.
So it's that's 118, and then you're going through, various other ones. There's a bundle that they do. Now, these ones that we're talking about, 113 to 118, they don't come with a Saru cartridge. It's just
Yeah.
the Saturn.
It's probably worth highlighting for anyone that's completely unaware of what these exactly are.
Yeah.
These are effectively kind of miniaturized Sega Saturns. They've got original Sega Saturn motherboards in there, but they are fully designed and repurposed to only support the Saru cartridge. So the Saru cartridge is it was what 10 years ago that it first kind of
Reared
the
its
idea
head,
or the
yeah.
schematic was first shared, and then in the last year or so they've really gained traction, especially in Chinese sellers selling these cartridges. They're essentially flash carts, and they're very interesting things as for the carts themselves. James you found a couple of
Mhm.
really good value ones. Um, they're on the way, so you can look forward to a Sega Guys discussion and review of those. But
Mhm.
they essentially allow you to load games from the cartridge in place of a CD drive. And they also do other things, backup memory, 4 MB RAM card, all that sort of lovely stuff. So effectively, you may not need a disk drive, but we'll get onto why they're not a full replacement for a disk drive later. But what these Sega Saturns are, is they're taking the motherboards off the old Sega Saturns, plonking them in these smaller shells um, of different colors with different buttons, sometimes putting a clear overlay on so you can see the motherboard. But without the CD drive, all they are is for this Saru cartridge and to play games off that. And as you were saying, mate, some of them don't even come with the Saru cartridge. So you're just getting a console, a box that you can't actually do anything with without buying that specific cartridge after.
Aye. And just to caveat this as well, some of the kind of kickback that I had like, on X and things like that as well when talking about this, we aren't anti-Saru, right? It's like people think that you're having a go at Saru or the people behind Saru whenever you're criticizing these machines because you're saying they only support Saru. That's just to point out that what the way they've done it is they've actually rewired the power supply. So the power input is essentially right beside where the little cutout they've got for the CR2032 battery to go in. So by moving the power to there and making that port for the battery smaller, these sellers aren't daft. They've blocked Satiator, so you can't put a Satiator in there. You know they're doing things to basically lock these machines to Saru, and we're not against Saru. Saru is a phenomenal kind of the cartridge itself. What it's doing is something that 5-10 years ago we were screaming out for something like that, and the ODE space has been brilliant. Rhea, Phoebe, Fenrir, Mode, Satiator, all brilliant things. But Satiator's at the really high end when it comes to not opening up your console. The ones I found for us were on sale for the choice day at £37 each. They've got beveled edges, gold plating on the cartridge, build quality is great, and it comes with the shell for the cartridge. 180 odd sold, all 5-star reviews. So again, as Dan said, when those arrive, we will give our views on them, but we're not anti-Saru. But and we will go into it in more detail as to why we're kind of against these, I've dubbed them Ali-Saturns, is because primarily they are, butchering Saturns to build these things. And the argument you get back is that, well, there's millions of Saturns out there, but there's not quite the numbers that, if you were to look around and estimate, what was it? Trekkie said 9.86 million in the wild from back in the day. How many of those have been lost to kind of natural attrition, people binning them, moving on, floods, fires, damage, all that kind of stuff? How many active Saturns are out there in comparison to the likes of PS 120 odd million units, PS 250 or whatever it is million units?
Yeah.
So Saturns, as time goes on, are going to become harder and harder to find if these things gain popularity and continue to have Saturns getting butchered just to make these machines. And that's what we want to kind of get into. We're not anti-Saru, just to kind of caveat that.
Yeah, I mean, Panda said that I think Sega's official numbers are 8.8 million Sega Saturns, which is the lowest that I've seen actually, because other sources say it's 9.6. The official documentation from the 90s suggests that it could be up to 17 million Sega Saturns, which 17 million sounds like a lot. And then you compare that to the Sega Mega Drive, it's less than half the amount that the Sega Mega Drive sold. Less than half what the SNES sold, less than half what the NES sold. It's a fraction of PS1. Xbox 360s, like several times as many. And as for you, mate, you're talking about natural attrition. Back in, must be 2004, my CD drive on my Sega Saturn died. And I went on eBay and ordered another one. And what did I do with the one that died? I didn't see any value in it. So I binned it. Guilty. I was 21. The one that I bought, replacement, was no more than 20 quid, fully converted. That one's gone to heaven now. But I think, and that's the thing, isn't it? Because I got one that I binned when I was in my 20s. I got the replacement that I got, had a good 18 years life of it. And then 2 years ago, I sent that one to Simon to be repaired or to be just to be serviced, and he opened it up and it was just an absolute horror show in there. So that one basically became a bunch of spare parts because it was unsalvageable. Got that one there that I got from an auction site, which doesn't work at all. Its visuals are all corrupt. So
yeah.
Is that going to be economically repairable, or is this one going to be spare parts? So they are endangered species, basically. They are on their way out, and chopping up the motherboard to kind of fit in these shells, because I think it's the VA1s will fit into those shells, won't they? The VA1. So for those that don't know, there were 15 or 17 revisions,
15, yeah.
15
Yeah.
revisions of the Sega Saturn motherboard. And the very first one fits into the shell, but all the other ones, I think they're having to trim those up to get them into these little shells. Um, and if they get some, I know there's an argument, isn't there, that they're taking consoles that are junk. If you go on a Japanese auction site, everything's junk. But that one there is junk. They're not going to turn that into a Saru because that one's clearly got an issue with the one of the VDP, one of the visual display units. That's the
Junk,
yeah, that one was junk.
fully working, you know, unbelievable.
So James, for those who are listening, James is holding up his brand new. So tell us what you got, James. He's got a brand new Sega Saturn, brand new to him. That is, it's not brand new
Yeah.
rolled off the production line.
I know. I keep forgetting we've got an audio podcast at times. Where I'm holding things up to the camera, like, yeah, people can see that through the headphones. Um, but yeah, so basically, back in the day, after I'd imported Dreamcast, I got the import bug, and I had one of these imported one, and it was one of the many things that were sold off in 2007. So I've always kind of wanted a grey one back, and what prompted me to get one was this story, because I'm like, these kind of so-called junk Saturns, they're called junk because in Japan, basically, it just means bulk. It just means like stuff that would be too expensive if they were to bin it. Basically, it would be too expensive, and anything that they have no means of testing gets labeled junk. So, like as an example, I got the Virtual On twin sticks boxed with a copy of Virtual On marked as junk, like just because they had no means of testing it, and it was I think it was about 28 quid or something like that. But the Japanese, excuse me, auction sites are an absolute treasure trove of stuff. Like these Saturns are 10 a penny, and that's where these guys are picking these up from for these Chinese machines to get to hack them up. But just because it says junk doesn't mean it's going like this kind of misconception of a rather large YouTuber who blocked us after we had a interaction on Twitter was of the opinion that these were basically sitting in a landfill, and nobody wanted them. If someone wanted a Sega Saturn, they'd have bought one by now. A really, really selfish viewpoint that it's not about what we want and what we need just now. Like hardware preservation is just as important as software preservation. So whenever we are memories and people on YouTube are in the future are looking up Sega Saturn and they stumble across us, if the passion we've got for this is infectious enough, we want these people, whether it's 10, 15, 20 years down the line, to be able to go out and find a real Sega Saturn, not an Ali-Saturn that's been chopped up. And that's why it's important that, if you look on these auction sites, and we'll go into the kind of the prices, these are not as expensive as you think, right? We'll get into that in due course. But yes, I've put a power supply on it. There we go. See, all nice and hooked up and tested. This drive's lovely, nice and smooth, but the Saru will be going in there. Just to kind of take any strain off the disk drive. I want to last as long as possible. But yeah, junk does not mean landfill, people, on auction sites. It's not the same as it is in the UK if someone marks something as junk.
Yeah, absolutely, and we'll get into kind of the cost side in a bit, and especially when we start talking about how you can maintain and enjoy your own Sega Saturn. But
Yep.
these Saru systems, they're overpriced, and to be honest, mate, I think they're absolutely hideous. The Sega Saturn has this very classic look. I mean, the obviously the Western ones, the chic black, especially with the oval buttons and the access light and the power light, absolutely beautiful, most beautiful console ever, right, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
The Japanese ones, which you showed just now, the grey one, with the blue buttons, again, absolutely gorgeous design. These ones are just so cheap looking, that you can feel the tackiness of the plastic through the photos. You haven't got, whereas on a real Sega Saturn, you'll have, power, reset, open on the buttons. These don't have any names in the buttons themselves. They just look very, very basic, very vanilla. and then you've just got this shell without any of the ergonomics that the existing Saturns had. It's just like someone you got the artist that's made the Sega Saturn, and then you've gone to like an 8-year-old art student. All right, we'll copy that in an hour. And then they've basically taken that and then just cut a window in it for the transparent screen to go on the top. I honestly think that they're hideous, and in doing that, they're moving away. What is the point in having? I know that hardware customization is obviously a thing, and you get these customized consoles. And to be honest, a lot of them look pretty amazing when you see stuff that the community does for some of this
Yep.
stuff, some of the artwork and everything. But this is just so far away from the original design; it just can't be considered artistic. And you take in these ugly Frankenstein consoles and then removing functionality away. And like you said, mate, this isn't functionality that they're removing that you can restore later on.
Yep.
They can't.
Yep.
You can't. Once they become one of these Ali-Saturns, there's no going back, is there?
No. No, and they're purposefully, blocking off features, like I said, like access to using a satiator and, or a video CD card, if you wanted to go down that route. It's the money that you're paying for these things compared to a real system, but you're paying more to get less. And the other thing as well, people they accuse you of gatekeeping whenever you talk about this. Who are you to say what people should spend their money on? Look, see, if you want to spend your money on this monstrosity, batter in. We're not here to tell you don't spend money on this thing. If you like them and you want to buy one, that's your choice and your decision. But we're here to basically to say to people who are considering these things, just take a step back and think about the purchase logically. What are you getting for your money? You're paying 115, £118 for a stripped out system with less functionality that can only use one ODE option. Now, if you're only interested in Saru, that's great. But it's just you're paying more to get less. So it's not that we're gatekeeping or saying that we're deciding what people should spend their money on or how the remaining Saturns in the world should be used. But as I've also said, you don't mistake passion for gatekeeping. It's like, yes, we are passionate about the Saturn. Everybody that knows us by now knows the Saturn's our favourite system. It's no secret. And whenever we see these things popping up, they are utterly morbid. And then there's ones as well that have got like screens attached to them as well,
Yeah.
like flip up screens, and like the screen section of the shell isn't as long as the bottom part that's got the console, and whenever it closes, there's like a gap, but it doesn't come all the way to the end, and it looks like you said, mate. You can literally sense the tackiness coming through the photographs, you know. And the thing is, well, you mentioned about the revisions of the motherboard. There were 15 revisions, and the problem, and this is what Trekkie's pointed out as well, is that some of these machines are using VA15 motherboards, and VA15 are very recognizable because it's got the SH2s on a single chip. So that instantly you look through a window in one of these and you see a single SH, they're both in the one die. That's a VA15. Why is that so relevant, you might be asking? The VA15 was the last motherboard revision manufactured by Sega for the Saturn, and it was in late 97 that they made this. That motherboard was then used in consoles through 1998 until like discontinuation. In 1998, in Japan, that motherboard was used to manufacture This Is Cool Saturns and Skeleton Saturns, which go for about 350 quid a pop on eBay. They are ripping open rare Sega Saturn consoles. They don't care if they work or not. Like, could be like that one there. If they come across that one there, that's a VA1. It's a Mark 1. I've had it open. The lid comes off. There's no cables connecting it. So it's a nice, easy lid off the top VA1. Like, they don't give a shit that works. All they want is a motherboard out of it to hack it up and put it in one of these shells. These beautiful shells, what a machine, man. It's fucking gorgeous. And they're throwing the shell away. There's been photographs out there of these piles of CD-ROM like just disk drives, power supplies, and shells. And like, what are they doing with them? Are they going on a landfill? Most
Yeah,
likely, it might be the way you went at 21-year-olds. Don't need that. Fuck it, throw it away. You know, it's like that's the problem. Like they're hacking up. I think was it Trekkie said there's a 50% chance if you find one of these and they've got a VA15 motherboard, it's a 50% chance that it came from a skeleton or this is cool Saturn. That's criminal, mate.
I know. Yeah, I mean, the irony is, I think, as Nick says in his Shiro article, is that you end up with a motherboard that's probably more more expensive than than what it's been sold for, but you don't have the rare case to put it in, and you can't put it back in the rare case because it's missing parts. So it's almost worthless there. But yeah, and these screens, mate. I mean, I can't imagine for a second, the cost that these systems are going in with the screens, that they're going to be screens that have some sort of decent line doubling solution to work with them. They're literally going to be RCA to a terrible flat panel LCD. Um, so even if you wanted one of these consoles for portability, they're going to be pretty appalling. And James is showing one on the screen right now. They look awful. And the thing is, and we'll go back to the cost thing now. So these cost, but how much was that one with the screen?
The one with the screen, mate, is 191 quid.
So you're getting a cheap, crappy LCD screen to stick with that, and you're still going to have to
And
bonk it down.
sorry, mate, that's without a Saru and no controller. That's just for the console and the screen.
So then you have to put in another, let's say, £45 for a Saru, a decent Saru. I think we'll talk about Saru a bit later because they are worth talking about and definitely something worth considering. But our advice is not to consider it in this guise. But you can't really stick a Fenrir in here. Fenrir is the ODE replacement, CD replacement that we use. Um, Unless you plan on taking the whole thing apart every time you want to update a game on an SD card. And even then, I don't think, looking at the shell, I'm not even certain that the Fenrir would fit in there.
I don't think there's clearance for it, mate. By the time you, I mean, then again, it doesn't have the pegs. The pegs have been removed that the
Yeah,
CD-ROM drive sits on, so they've took those off. Because if you've got a Fenrir, you'll know that there's two holes at the back. Excuse me, and they sit on two of the pegs that the CD-ROM's mounted on, and then you get a little stand at the back to support the back end of it. But yeah,
yeah.
those have been completely removed. Looking at the pictures as well, so there's no clearance to fit a Fenrir
So
in there.
I mean, even if you put the ribbon cable in and somehow jammed it in, you're probably risking shorting the whole thing out, and there's going to be contact between the Fenrir and the motherboard, and there's a reason why you have the stands and everything and the clearance in there anyway. So you're essentially you're paying more for less. So this one with the LCD 180 plus 45, let's say for the Saru, they actually go for a fair bit more, but you can get decent ones for less. You can get awful ones for less as well. Let's remember that as well. Or they're £100 and you still have to pay 150 for the Saru. Um, the Sega Saturns aren't overly expensive these days. I mean, they can be. If you go into eBay and you're looking for one, a local one, a local power one, or if you're an American viewer and you're looking on, the second-hand market for a working Sega Saturn, a lot of the time they're probably going to be around 100 quid. I think they go for more or less that amount, maybe with a few games if they're working. If they're not working, probably around 60 or so, wouldn't they? Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, aye. Looking on kind of CEX at our prices, I think it's about 80 to 90 for an unboxed Mark One, and I think for some reason the Mark Two is an extra £10. It was last time I checked £10 more expensive than the Mark One. Probably because it's got a newer motherboard in it, I would imagine, is why. But aye, so similar kind of prices.
Do you know, I wouldn't often recommend this, but CX do warranty, for that price. It's not a bad shout. So what you get in there compared to what you're getting with with these AliExpress Saturns is you're getting a console that is confirmed to be working in its original case with a controller and with a working CD drive, and you get warranty on that as well from CEX. Um, it's your choice to do with that what you will, but you could still put a Saru in there, and hey, you can still use that just as you would do one of these Sega Saturns. You're getting something for a comparable price, but with more functionality and in its original casing. Or you could get one that's faulty. Now, these Sarus are meant to replace the CD drives. You can get a faulty Sega Saturn for what? Probably about 50 quid. And then you get a Saru. You're paying less than £100. You've still got the CD drive that you can replace if you feel like it. You can put your MPEG reader in there if you want, in the side, your video CD card. You can do all the normal stuff with your Sega Saturn, and you can restore it if you want, but for less. Um, there's just no economic reason to buy one of these because they are it's just so overpriced for what they are. You're effectively paying more for less, and that's the point. And as you said, mate, we're not trying to tell people how they should spend their money, but what we're trying to do as, enthusiasts around of the Sega Saturn and of Sega in general is try and allow you to make an educated decision, and try and help you understand why we feel the way that we feel, and why we feel that these aren't worth the money, and why we feel that they may be damaging to the long-term lifespan of the console and of the scene. But I think that's the biggest thing, isn't it, mate? Is that you are paying more for less functionality when you yourself, and this is probably the most extreme, and I think even what you paid for that Sega Saturn really shocked a lot of people. If you go on the Japanese auction sites, I was talking about local shopping. If you go onto the Japanese auction sites where the Saturn sold very well, and as you said, James, junk over there doesn't necessarily mean junk as it does over here. Would you like to tell our audience how much you paid for your Sega Saturn?
So to caveat things, thanks to Tom Thumb, basically Tom does orders from Japan a lot, and he's on the auction sites. And he very kindly, because he's already got a big order coming, allows me to buy the odd thing, and he just includes it. So the only shipping that I pay is from Tom to me, right? So at the absolute worst, if you were to go on the auction sites, you're looking at maybe 50 quid to ship if you're using the fastest method, right? Just before I start with this, the Saru on its own, the Saru Saturn, sorry, that was 118. It's actually 133 after taxes are added at checkout. You're then 27 quid for shipping, £45 for the Saru, and £20 for a controller. That's you up to £225, right? Think about it. This, with an official memory cartridge, controller, £19, right? The shipping and seller fees. So that basically the seller fees plus the shipping from the seller to Sendico for them to send it out took it up to 28. So see, even at the absolute worst case, if I was to pay £50 and get that shipped myself, you're still what, £78 to ship a Sega Saturn from Japan. You're then £45 for your Saru on top of that. You're half the price of one of those Ali-Saturns straight away, and you're getting an actual machine in full working order that you can still use the Saru if you want, or you can get a Satiator if you want, or you can get a Fenrir if you want. You then have those options. That's what we're trying to say here. You're paying more to these guys to get less when there's better options out there to maintain the real hardware and use the real Sega Saturn.
And that's the thing, as enthusiasts and as people that want people to play and discover the Sega Saturn in the best way possible, these can't come with any sort of recommendation. Our recommendation is that we recommend that you avoid these things. They are overpriced, they are lacking functionality, they are ugly, and there's just no real redeeming features about them. I don't think, the only good point that I could glean from, Nick's interview on not his interview, his article in Shiro, was that when one of the stores actually responded to him, because it sounded like the store, some of the stores were, pretty good at answering questions. One of them said that they do recap the consoles,
Yes, aye.
um, which is a good thing, but it's like I'd struggle to call it a silver lining. It's nice that they're being recapped, and if you wanted to glean any sort of positive from it, I think that's the only one that you could really glean. But even then, the fact that they're having to go through that process to recap it, I don't think that doesn't really factor into the conversation, does it?
No, and it's again, and not to try and call anybody's kind of workmanship into question, but what kind of lifespan have these systems got? Because again, when Trekkies was talking about whenever he looked at one, the pins on where the power supply goes, um, they are bent. They were, you could see there was a bend on the pins at the power supply where they've obviously, because on these Saturns they've moved them to the right hand side as you're looking at the console, back left as you're looking at the rear beside the kind of slot that comes out for the battery. They've moved it from the left to the right, and by doing so they've had to then rewire it. What kind of strain or damage has been done to the motherboard whenever they've been moving this over? What kind of like lifespan? And what worries me is I've just added one of those to my cart to check the shipping and the tax, and it says almost sold out. Stop buying them. Stop buying them.
Oh my God! Stop! Oh,
Unbelievable. But there's just no redeeming features of them, mate. It blows my mind that someone would genuinely consider one of those over real hardware, even if you're based in the UK. I brought up CEX, an unboxed Model 1, 105, unboxed Model 2, 110. That's with a 2-year warranty and a controller and all the cables to connect it to a CRT, right? Now, it's like, I'm no big fan of CEX. I'm not going to sit on here and build up CEX. I've had my issues with CEX in the past, but even that is half the price. You walk into CEX and there's a Saturn and you walk out the door with it that same day. You go on AliExpress, you find one of these Sarus and you pick one of them up. You're still paying less. Even paying these buggers over the odds, you're still paying less than buying one of these Ali-Saturns, mate. I can't see any kind of option or caveat or twist on things that would make these things worth buying. Every angle you come at it, there's just an argument against buying them.
yeah, and yeah, you know that these Ali-Saturns must be doing something wrong if you're championing CEX. Because I'm like you, mate. I'm like struggling to say, but I actually think that it's a pretty good deal, especially with the warranty.
You feel
Especially with
dirty.
it.
Itching here, mate. Honestly,
But yeah, it's not bad, and you can go in if you go into a CEX store with a Sega Saturn in there. Chances are there'll be a couple of games in there as well, and they'll probably want to charge you £45 for a copy of Bug without manual, but you might be able to get something like Sega Rally and Virtua Fighter 2 for less than a tenner.
aye.
And you got to, and imagine it's you've if you played many games with the discs on this one that you since you got it, mate.
I will. The only disc I've got so far, I've obviously got like Virtua Fighter Remix that came with the NetLink modem, but that only lets you play it as a NetLink game. You can't actually boot it up to play Virtua Fighter Remix. So I've got Virtual On, and that's what I say. I had it. I just left it running for like an hour on the track mode for Virtual On, and like I just keep holding it up, man, because it's just beautiful. But it's like I had it running, and the disk drive sounded nice and smooth. Like the operation was lovely. It was no clicks or grinds or anything. It was just phew, a nice wee
Gorgeous sounding
smooth.
drive in it.
Aye. So, I mean, don't get me wrong. I've already got a couple of disc-based games on the way, thanks to Tom. I've got VF1, VF2, Sega Rally, and Panzer Dragoon on the way. So a couple of wee favourites that I'd just like to have on disc. Because there is still something. Don't get me wrong, mate. After so long having the ODE, it did feel quite nice and nostalgic clicking that disc in. And obviously the Japanese one makes a different noise when you open the tray. That doodly doodly doodly
Yep.
doo. It's like, it's so good, you know. So it was fun putting the disc in and kind of hearing it spin up and watching the access light come to life. Obviously with the Fenrir, the access light's disabled, so it's just power. And that's it. But I say this won't replace my PAL Saturn with the Fenrir in it. It's very much that's still the emotional attachment to that Saturn because it's still the Saturn from back in the day. But it's a says to Tom, this hasn't been bought to sit on a shelf or to be an ornament. It will be hooked up. It will get used. Um, it's just nice as well to have like a dedicated Japanese 60 hertz machine, and most of all, it's been saved, mate. The
It
vultures
has
can't
been
get
said.
they can't get their hands. You're never touching it. It's mine. So, aye,
Taking the
chuff.
bullet.
That's it, mate. It's safe. You're safe. It's like,
But yeah, that's because that's what I was going to say. It's the sound of the Saturn disk drive is just so nostalgic for me, and I think if you're going to going back to if you're going getting a physical one, even if you're getting it from CEX, you're getting that warranty, that peace of mind. You can pick up a disc-based game, and you're going to get to enjoy the whole experience. So yeah, there's just no reason to pick these one up, and there is a lot of big YouTubers, social media influencers that saying, "Oh, these Saru Saturns are fantastic," um, and hopefully, I know we're kind of shouting into the storm a little bit with this. It's the same as Shiro. Where some of these influencers had like 160,000 subscribers. We're a fraction of that. Um, hopefully, hopefully we can steer some of you guys in the right direction, give you some sound advice, and hopefully we can stop more of these Frankenstein Saturns from going out and hopefully get some decent Saturns into the hands of you guys, because that's what it's all about. Is if you're thinking of getting a Saturn, then there's other ways. We spoke about just now about ways that you can pick one up for an affordable price. And hopefully, you'll join the Sega Saturn Club with your own nice Sega Saturn with or without a disc drive. But I think that's what we'll get talking about in the next part, mate, is, once you've got your Sega Saturn, here's what you can do to keep it running.
and I think it's ironic that the console that no one wanted in the 90s is the one that has seen the most innovation in the shortest period of time in the retro space. Like, you consider I joined this community, it'll be like 5 years ago, pretty much whenever we started the channel or the podcast, and seeing the advancements, the mods, the growth of the community is astounding. Like, there's just so much. There's an option for every pocket for what you're wanting to do. You can go as crazy as you want and spend silly money on like the most expensive mods, or if you're not looking for the absolute best, there's other options available that do just as good a job, maybe a bit cruder looking, or comes from different websites. Have to order from China, or some things come from Andorra and it's higher shipping costs. It's whatever option you want to go with. There is something for everybody, and every part of the Saturn that needs to be replaced to maintain it can be, and that's the most important thing.
Yeah, it really is, mate. And yeah, so if you're thinking of picking up a Sega Saturn, or if you own a Sega Saturn already, we talked about a few ways that you can pick up a Sega Saturn just now. But I think the first thing is that I'll always mention, and I just remember Simon Locke always saying this, is that the first thing you need to do is replace your PSU. I think there are a number of issues that can raise when you've got 40 PSU. And sometimes it looks like you've got an issue with your Sega Saturn. It could be that your PSU. These PSUs weren't designed to run for 30 years.
No.
So they've got capacitors on there that can go. They're old, they're bulky. They're getting the great big, figure eight plugged directly into them. So that's 240 volts plugged, or 110 if you've got a Japanese one with a step down converter, but still a lot going in. And yeah, you can get these nice little Pico PSUs or these Saturn PSUs, all very much variations of the same theme. They're kind of credit card sized power supplies. that slot into your Sega Saturn. A lot of them come with some great little instruction manuals, and then they connect via a laptop style AC adapter. So yeah, James, you picked one up recently, didn't you? And your experience, obviously, you had the Pico PSU in your Sega Saturn that you know your original Sega Saturn that your uncle had, and then you picked up one of these Saturn PSUs recently. And yeah, tell us a little bit about that because that was you know what came with it and how you installed it was I thought pretty cool.
I so it's basically as Dan says, it's like it's credit card size. It's fact smaller than a credit card. The the manual that it came with was really detailed.
It
Obviously,
comes with a manual. That's
it
the
comes
point.
with yeah, it comes with a manual. There's a little kind of like jumper switch on there to set between 3.3 volts and 5 volts. So it's like the earlier models you have to be set to 3.3. The later on models have to be 5 volts. So just got to set your voltage on there. And yeah, mate, it's really straightforward. I mean, the funny thing is that obviously I got in that nice shiny new PSU through, and I thought I'm going to put the new one in my pal Saturn. I'll take the old Pico I've had for 4 years out, and the Mark One Saturn is not an or the VAO Mark One Saturn is not an easy machine to work with. Right, it's spaghetti junction, but obviously I've took out the Pico. I put that in. 3 days later, the Japanese Saturn arrives, so it goes to look inside and open it up, and obviously the connector for the Pico. When I bought it from Coaster, I'd ordered it, forgetting it was 4 years ago. I'd ordered it with the PAL plastic connector that fills. Whenever you take the back of the Saturn, you take the figure eight out. Basically, you have to put this little kind of black 3D printed piece of plastic in, and then that's your kind of your plug socket there that replaces it. But on the PAL Saturn, because it was a VAO and the power supply was originally mounted to the underside of the top of the lid, it's a monster. Honestly, the VAOs are just a mess inside, but it had a different shape, it had a little bit that kind of drops down, an extra bit of plastic. So obviously, this machine doesn't have that extra bit of plastic space, so that little 3D printed bit wouldn't fit. So I had to swap them back around again. So the Pico is back where it was originally, and the Saturn PSU is inside here. But it's all very, detailed, well laid out instructions. That cost me £7.41. Now that came without a plug, but I've got a plug that fits that there because I've with the Pico PSU, I bought a power supply that was all in the plug. It was at Simon sent me a link to a guy that sells basically the PSUs built into the plug rather than the kind of the laptop style brick that came with the Pico. But I've still got that laptop style brick. So that'll just use that with the Japanese Saturn. It's not a problem. It works. It's fine. But everything that it comes with is nicely packaged. It's weighty. Now I know that the likes of Volta, massively respected modder in the community, he's really big on recapping your PSUs, and that's something that you can do. But again, you're still pumping all that original excess heat in there, that extra voltage in there. When I took this out the box, I did not think it was going to be, just to try and show it, it's really well made. Like it doesn't feel light. It's got a real bit of heft to it. Feels really well made. Connectors are nice and tight. Comes with all the cables as well. So if you have got the VEO PAL Saturn, what's quite clever is that little kind of square 3D printed bit, they actually give you a separate piece of plastic that clips onto that. So you can change that shape into the shape for the PAL Saturn. So they're covering all the bases. They're giving you everything because the VEO Saturn, you don't actually slot onto the pins like those there because of the way that the Saturn's pins on the VEO are positioned. They're really close to the front of the system, so you couldn't actually have the space to mount that. They give you the extra cables that you need to kind of daisy chain it through. The whole thing's in the kit, and it's really well made. So I've ran that for a few hours. I've had the Pico PSU and my PAL Saturn that I got from Coaster for 4 years. Never had any issues with them at all. So they run nice and cool as well. which is also a bonus. Hours of play, no overheating or anything. So power supply wise, if you want to go down the route of recapping and you're really good at soldering and you want to do that, there's sites out there that will sell you the full kit, depending on your version of Saturn that you've got. They'll send you a kit with all the caps on it, and you can do it yourself. But personally, I've never had any issue using the Pico variants at all, and that's been over 4 years, mate. I've had them, so no problem.
Yeah, 2 years for both of mine. Both of my Saturns that I
No,
use. My daily ones. I've both got those PSUs in, and they're fine. And yeah, people can recap them, but that's the thing. There are options, and there's a barrier of entry. And don't be. I think I think one of the key things that we probably should mention is that don't be afraid to open up your Sega Saturn to do the basic stuff. Recapping your PSU is very advanced stuff. I wouldn't do it, but opening it up to change your power supply and your disk drive is literally the power. The opening it up is 4 screws and the top lifts up. The VAOs are a little bit different, but yeah,
so
James is
uh,
showing a picture now.
it's basically that's so the VAO. Whenever you undo the screws, you have to lift the Saturn, like spin it round and face it away from you, and lift the back corners up and lift it up carefully and open it almost like a pizza box. Is the best way to just honestly, that is the best description I can think. It's like a pizza box, just and gently, because look, so that's like the reset button and the power button. There's little tiny cables that are all running. So that those two halves of that shell, mate, are connected by those little tiny cables. So that's obviously when I put the Saturn
Yeah,
PSU, and that's the Fenrir, but you can see what you're working with in terms of wiring. It's that Japanese super yellow tape that's never lost its stickiness in like 30 years. But the VEOs are very, delicate to work with. VA1s, are basically just as you said, 4 screws, mate. You just lift the lid off. It's like
yeah.
everything's there.
E- everything else. Apart from the VAOs are the exception. Everything else, if you've got Model 2 Saturn, it's literally 4 screws, lift, 1 screw in the power supply, two clips, lift up. CD drive, same sort of deal. Couple of screws, couple of clips, ribbon cables, out it comes. Very, very easy. So don't be intimidated by it. Some of this stuff, unless you've got a VAO, in which case, just be careful. I think. But yeah, so I think that's the first thing about maintaining your Sega Saturn is just making sure that you've got a working PSU in it, and even working means fully working. Your PSU may be fine, but those capacitors could not be given the resistance that they need to be doing. They could be putting too much amperage current into your motherboard, and that's going to cause no end of problems. So get those fixed. And that's the other thing about these Ali-Saturns, mate. I don't know what you've already mentioned, didn't you? What's their longevity, given how the pins work, and are you going to be able to upgrade them or fix them? Jury's out on those.
I don't see many people sending Simon these kind of Saturns. If I think Simon would probably send it back to you with a few choice words on a note if you sent him one of those to fix. It's aye. And that's the other worry as well, mate, is that if and when, and possibly more likely when these break, what are people going to do with them? Are they just going to toss them? And then that's these working Saturn motherboards that are just going to be discarded, you
Yeah.
know. And these big channels that kind of that champion these, and hundreds of thousands of views talking about, oh, look, cool new Saru Sega Saturn. It's like it's just really irresponsible. It's like they've got the views, they've got the monetization, they're happy, and the damage that they're doing is that, they're informing hundreds of thousands of people, making these things out to be something that they're not. And you've just got us and Shiro sitting here, trying to shout into the storm and hope that we reach somebody. If we can
Yeah.
save one Sega Saturn, we already have.
Yeah.
We saved that one. So if we get another one, that'll be good.
Yeah. So talked about PSUs, And then I think the elephant in the room is, of course, always going to be the disk drive. Now, these disk drives, they weren't built to last 30 years. You know, I've got a CD player upstairs, like an old deck from the 80s, and that is on its way. That barely reads anything. You know, most of my CD consoles are gone. I've got my Xbox that's been through 4 DVD drives. I've got PS2 that doesn't read any discs. You know, they all go. So sadly, it is a case of, like you saying about the Sarus now, even with real Sega Saturns, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when is your disk drive going to go. Or, as we were saying earlier, you might have bought a Sega Saturn without a disk drive, where it's like sold as 40. Yeah, just give us 30 quid for the Sega Saturn that doesn't read discs. Well, you're in luck. Because, as you said earlier, James, there are so many options out there for people that don't have a disk drive or don't even, it may be, I mean, I've got a Sega Saturn with a working disk drive as of you now, but that doesn't mean that we're going to be always sticking discs into these. um, you know, I use my Fenrir Saturn because it preserves the disk drive, doesn't put the strain on the disk drive. um, so there's various options that you can retain a disk drive, you can lose a disk drive. And I don't think we'll cover too much of, you know, we'll probably link the original discussion in the description, won't we, about the buying a Sega Saturn in 2023, because we talk about a lot of the ODE solutions there.
Yep, yep.
But yeah, I don't know, mate. Do you want to go through the ODE solutions and then
Yeah. So I mean, obviously, you talk about if you've got like your disk drive and it's working. Like I chose to take whenever I got that Saturn back from my uncle. Like I'd made the decision that I wasn't going to go down the route of buying discs. So your good self, I sent you that CD-ROM drive, and it's
going strong?
hopefully still had got a lot of use in it. You know, it was used once a week for a year, so it's got nice longevity in it. But yeah, I mean, the options is obviously Rhea and Phoebe, which were done by the guy who created GDMU. Again, those are not really much of an option now because I don't even believe he makes them much, if at all, now. It was the same issue with GDMU that pre-orders wouldn't be, they would be announced at kind of shotgun, kind of, you had to be up at 3 in the morning and, oh, right, okay, we can buy one. They just weren't readily available. We've also got Fenrir, which is our kind of ODE of choice. Brilliant support from SED, you know, completely replaces the CD drive. It's literally two ribbon cables and a wee power cable that clips into it. It's so easy. It's plug and play. It's just there's no soldering in any of these at all, by the way. You know, as I said, said the guy CED, but as I said, you know, said has got brilliant support. He's got his Discord. He's always releasing kind of updates. Been quiet for a while, but he has done regular updates. Fenrir used to be for 20 and 20 pin models. There was two separate boards. He's amalgamated the design now, so one board fits any Sega Saturn, so you just get one purchase. At the time of recording this, Fenrir is actually available from SED's site direct for €90. It's on sale. 105 down to 90 plus shipping. So if you're in the UK, especially, the shipping's not that much. So you can get
It's a
yourself a
bargain.
Fenrir under 100 quid for a Fenrir delivered. If you buy direct from said, absolute bargain. Then obviously you've got the mode, which is ships from Andorra. It's quite kind of high, you know, shipping on there as well, taxis. It works in the Dreamcast. It also works in PS1. It's a bit more, again, there's no soldering, but it's a bit more of a, I would say, destructive install. You have to remove the pegs from the motherboard for the CD drive because the mode is a big unit of
Yeah.
a device. But mode supports like, you know, USB, SD cards, SD, solid state drives, SSDs, etc. You know, so it's get more options in terms of what way you want to store your ROMs and access them. But that comes with the caveat of price. I think you're looking at closer to about 280 odd quid to
Yeah.
import that one.
It's Terrorungin,
Um,
isn't it? So it's, you
yeah,
know, so if you're familiar with Terrorungin's work, Mega SD, for example, for the Mega Drive, that's an FPGA solution that plays Mega CD games. That's just the same company, and yeah, you're right, mate. They have, there's so many options with the mode. You can stick a proper hard drive in there if you wanted to.
aye, yep.
Um, So yeah, it comes at a premium, and I think that Fenrir and Satiator all have pretty good compatibility as well. All
Yeah,
fairly aligned these days in terms of compatibility.
yeah. So obviously Satiator's the kind of the last one, Professor Abrasive, and it's ideal for people who don't want to open up their Saturns. It just slots in the video CD slot in the back, has an SD card slot in it, has its own UI, and compatibility's pretty much about there. It's on par with Fenrir now. For a little while, there was a couple of big games that didn't work on it. It was either X-Men versus Street Fighter or Marvel Superheroes. I think it was Marvel Superheroes versus Street Fighter didn't work for the longest time, and then last year there was finally an update to make that work. So Fenrir and Satiate are pretty close in terms of near 100% compatibility with the library. But again, Satiator, you're looking at about 300 odd pounds to import that. You get tax and your shipping on top of it. So there's something for every budget. But then obviously Saru comes into things, and you don't need to open your Saturn up at all to use that if you don't want to go down that route, and it's cheaper than all the other options at present.
You don't even have to pick the little door on the back of your Sega Saturn to put the card in. You just plonk it in the top. And I think it's probably a good time for us to talk a little bit about Saru. Obviously, we're going to go into a lot more detail when we get our hands on our own versions of it. But this wasn't covered in our discussion. So obviously, all of the details around and a lot more of our opinion and our views on the various ODE solutions are in, the linked video that'll be in the description. Buying a Sega Saturn in 2023, still relevant even though it's last year at the time of recording. But Saru is an interesting one. So compatibility wise, it's pretty far away from the others, isn't it? There's still a few issues. That's because of the way that instead of going, it's not emulating a disk drive effectively. That's the big difference. It's
Mm.
kind of, from what I understand, it's kind of passing the game data directly through the card slot. And as such, all games that I think that think that they're CDs have timing issues because the load speed and the transfer speed and everything is. So people have to kind of modify them to make sure that the Sega Saturn and the game and the software can work with them. I think that's accurate, isn't it?
Aye, some games will hang, looking around kind of various videos and people reviewing them after I picked up the ones for us. And they were saying that, like, randomly games will just hang. There's some games that don't work at all, just little kind of glitches, maybe graphical glitches and stuff like that. But the difference being that the guy who came up with the idea for Saru originally, after seeing all these kind of sellers, taking the schematic and building their own and selling them, he's been good enough to actually support all of these with firmware. So like he's put that out there and people have picked it up and kind of taken his ball and ran with it. But rather than kind of spitting a dummy about things, he's went, right, cool. You've taken my idea, you've made it a reality. I'll support people who buy it. And
Yeah.
there's regular firmware updates. And from the reviews that I've seen for the one that we bought, the seller will actually send an email over with the latest firmware version that's available with instructions on how to update it. So, in that regard, it's exciting in that, it's not like a original design kind of thing. It's, if you buy like a GDMU clone, for example, you can't upgrade it. But it's worth bothering upgrading it to fix two things. And one of them, Derek Pascarella's already fixed. So Code Veronica. But you can update these Sarus. They're not going to brick if you hit them with a firmware update because the guy who came up with the idea is supporting, all of the manufacturers who are putting these together. So the only thing you have to watch when you buy one is when you go on a listing on there and you pick one up, you need to make sure that it says they're using new chips, and you want to make sure they're using beveled edges on the cartridge. There's something like Saturn, David mentioned it before when we spoke about Saru a while back. that some of these sellers are basically harvesting chips from like old devices and cobbling together these cartridges. Now, the pictures on the listing that I've seen and the reviews on the listing that we've used, looking at the boards, they look immaculate. You know, they've got the gold plating on the pins, nice beveled edges, and it says on it new chips. So, you know, again, 180 odd sold and 5-star reviews. I mean, you can't ask for any more than that. And all going well when they arrive and we test them, they stack up to what we've seen. But you know, and if they do, you know, then by all means, by the time you're watching this, we'll have had those Sarus through. So the video may well be out, so you can, you know, cross-reference that if you want and see our reaction to them if they did meet the expectations of the review. But you know, it's a case of if you are going to buy one, just take the time to go through the reviews and check out, you know, photo reviews are always key in AliExpress. Make sure you look at photo reviews to see that what you're buying matches up to the, you know, what people are getting matches the description of what you're seeing. But as I say, if it is good and it matches up, I'll happily put the link in the description and people can, you know, check out that listing. And if they want to buy one, then you know that, you know, we've bought them and we're happy with them. We can recommend that seller.
Yeah, come with a Sega Guy's seal of approval, and I think that's the caveat. See, the you know, we started off bashing the AliExpress Saturns, but this the console, the actual cart itself is really promising, and I think when it first, it's quite an interesting turn of events. You know, you mentioned there that the guy, you know, he'd been developing it for a few years, and I think he kind of put it on the shelf because he thought that in his view the chips were all outdated, and I think that's the big thing about them is that a lot of the chips that are required for them aren't in kind of mass production anymore. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why you get ones with recycled chips in them, because effectively that's the only way that they can source this hardware. Um, I don't know how they create the new ones or where they get the new ones, or if there's people producing a very small number of them. But that's why you have the old chips that are recycled and harvested from other bits of hardware, and that's why you have, you know, these new chips. And obviously that leads to kind of a fair bit of variability in what you're getting, um, because not all Sarus are born equal. But if you know, some brick, if you use different firmware with them, you know, as much as the original creator of the Saru is trying to support them all. Unfortunately, um, some of them don't play well with the updates. So if me and James get hold of these and they work well, beveled edges, you know, you don't want one that hasn't got a beveled edge, because that will in fact damage your cartridge slot. So buyer beware. But if you find a good one, you know, Dave and Shiro guys, they found some great ones that they shared with the community. I think at the time they were a little bit more expensive than what we've managed to snag them for. It does seem like the carts are going down in price. I saw one on AliExpress earlier that was £28 before tax.
Mm.
Wouldn't recommend that. You know, just because they're cheap doesn't mean that you should pick them up. But
Yeah.
if you are if you're not worried about compatibility, and if you don't want to go through the rigor of opening your Sega Saturn up, bearing in mind what we said about the power supplies, then the Saru may be the option for you. You know, it's the cheapest, it's the most accessible. It doesn't have the best compatibility, but in the short time that it's been around, the rate at which that compatibility has kind of matured has. I've been playing too much Terminator, mate, because I'm about to say it's been accelerating at the geometric rate, but but it's been accelerating, hasn't it?
In the panic, they tried to pull the plug.
I've been playing that stupid Terminator Resistance on the Xbox.
Uh,
Absolutely fantastic. You know, as a game in itself, it's so budget. And you know, if it didn't have the Terminator license, it would be a 5 out of 10 game. But it does the Terminator license so well. It's a definite 10 out of 10 for me. I absolutely love it. But yeah, that's the first thing that popped in my head.
See, you got to get a movie or some kind of pun in there, mate. It's part of the course. Uh, but I mean, these ones that we got before the choice day sale, they were meant to be £81, and they're down to 38 with the choice sale. So obviously, once that sale ends, they'll go back up. And as I say, it says on it, brand new chip, gold immersion, obviously gold pins, and then edge beveling, which is the kind of the main one. And again, it comes in the shell. It's not as if it's got a nice Sonic the Hedgehog sticker on there. So that'll do. But I say, hopefully, we know when it arrives, we run them through their paces, and we can come back and report on it. Well, we purposefully held off on picking them up. I think we kind of played with the idea of buying a couple about maybe 6 months ago.
Yeah.
And we thought, now we'll wait until things mature a bit more and some newer kind of updates come out and compatibilities, improved, and maybe the manufacturing gets a bit, better. Which now all of those boxes seem to have been ticked. So I'm looking forward to trying it out, mate. It's good to try another option, but I'm still, Team Fenrir. I just think what Sed's done with that is phenomenal, and still going strong, over 4 years later. One of the first people to buy one, mate. April 2020 when I got that, so where is that gone? So
I know, mate.
Scary, but it's mad.
The thing is, though, it's worth noting as well that the Saru isn't just for your kind of disk drive replacement, because it does so much
Yep.
more. It's a 4 MB RAM card. It does basically works as a memory card, but works differently because I'm not sure how it works. I remember Dave telling us about it. And obviously, once we get our hands on it, we'll report back. But it has per game save, which basically
Yeah.
means that it creates a mimic internal memory for every single time that you load a new game up. So if you need to do a flash save on your copy of Dragon Force, that takes up the whole memory slot there, or play Stellar Assault SS, then you can do that. So it does other things as well, and it actually plays quite well, I think, once they've both been updated. I think it plays well with the Satiator from memory. And I know that the guy that was doing the updates said that it works with some Fenrirs. But the way that the logic to the way that the Fenrir talks to the Saturn, and the way that the Saru can interrupt it, depends, and it's really random. I can't. I will be able to find the tweet now, but it's something like, yeah, if you've got VAO, VA2, VA6, VA9, and VA13, it won't work, or something, or maybe it's the other way around.
Quick one have I got?
So, but yeah, and these things are, as I say, the rate that this has been progressing has been rapid. So this time next year, it really could be the de facto choice for ODE, and just functional, and it may play with nice with other ODEs. So we will see. But yeah, you've got options if you want to play Sega Saturn games, and you want to either preserve your disk drive and only use it for certain games, or if you've bought a Sega Saturn where the disk drive is on its way out or is completely kaput. But then you can always return that disk drive to the console, unlike the AliExpress Saturns. You can always go back, unlike those ones.
No. And one other little thing as well about the Fenrir is that it was Dragons of Saturn on the Shiro Discord, goes by Mr. Fredrickson. He actually made me aware of something that's been out for years for Fenrir, and I had no idea about it. So everyone's heard of like the Sega Saturn Kai, like, or the pseudo Saturn Kai. You can get an action replay and flash it. Well, there's a software-based version of the Kai software for Fenrir, and it's called Fenrir Loader Kai, and it basically sits in a folder as a disk image. On your Fenrir, it's completely, you're not flashing the Fenrir at all. It's all done software, and it actually adds a memory manager and brings in per game saves. You can actually manage, to and from the SD card and the internal memory. Fenrir out the box does allow you to back up to the SD card, but it backs up the entire contents of the internal memory. So, like, if you only want to take off your Panzer Dragoon Saga save and swap it out, you can't do that. But this Fenrir, loader Kai does allow you to do that. So I need to play about with that as well. Dragons of Saturn sent me the link to it, so I need to try it out and see how it goes. Obviously it adds a whole new front end because you're getting into that before loading any games up and stuff like that. And I'm quite partial to my Fenrir menu with my artwork that I spent far too much time adding. But I think I want to try it out and just see how those kind of per save, per game save states work on the
Yeah.
Fenrir.
Yeah, that'd be interesting to see how that works out. I mean, there's a load more that we could talk about because obviously there are other cartridges. You've got your 4 MB RAM card and you've got your memory card, but the action replay cards that let you do some memory manager play imports on your Sega Saturn. Again, be careful with those in the same way that Saru is. Make sure you get ones with beveled edges. They can also be turned into pseudo Saturns, just like you were saying just now, James. They can essentially work to play copied games, CDRs, and do all other sorts of crazy, decent things. So pseudo Saturn Kais are good. Although, if you want to preserve your disk drive, recommend you don't use CDRs. And if you do feel compelled to use CDRs in your console, make sure they're good quality CDRs rather than your pack of 16 for 99p that you get down Pound Stretcher or something, because they will burn your laser out.
I know, and people get quite kind of annoyed at that kind of. You see it kind of in the community over the years if people recommend not or don't recommend using burn discs because of damage to lasers, and there's no proof that that's the case. It's all about, as you say, the quality of the disc, and I believe it's the speed that you burn it at as well. It's like the quality of the burn onto the disc.
Yeah.
In the day, if you're putting any non-standard disc in there, you're clearly going to put extra strain on the laser, making it try to read something that's not the standard that it was, designed and whatnot to actually read. So, I mean, don't get me wrong. Again, if you want to use CDRs, it's their choice. Just make sure they're good quality ones, and they're
Yeah.
burnt properly. Because last thing you want is getting in the back with that wee potentiometer and try to turn that wee dial and turn the power up and end up burning the bloody thing out. So, aye, there you go.
Absolutely, mate. And then beyond that, it's just genuine device care. Really, just make sure that clean your consoles. Big advocates of making sure that your consoles are clean. Don't let that dust build up in there, especially if you're keeping your CD drive. I think it's probably worth mentioning that wireless pads can be a good idea for preserving your console. I think you had the wireless pad for a bit, didn't you? And
Didn't like it.
they're I think what you get, there's very little latency, but I think it still is there to a degree. And also the build quality of the pads isn't quite the same as the originals. But if you are concerned about pulling pads in and out of the socket, I know that caused hell with some of my Sega Mega Drive and Sega Master Systems over the years.
Mhm.
That's another thing that you can do to preserve your Saturn. And I think that really is just about it, isn't it? I think, is there anything else that we, to these are precious little consoles, aren't they, mate? And they do require a little bit of TLC, a little bit of care when you're handling them.
They're getting on, mate. They're getting on. They're becoming senior citizens in the gaming community. It's like, and daft like people going, clean your Saturns or clean your consoles, but it's like just general kind of like housekeeping on them. It's like if you want anything to last, look after it. It's just keep them nice and clean. Just check your vents. They've got these vents for a reason, right? It's to disperse heat. So if they're getting clogged up, it's not going to be good for them. It's like you see people with Dreamcast and they've got like the right hand side crammed up against like a shelf, like an IKEA unit. And I'm like, what's it for Christ's sake? It's like just move it a wee bit to the left, please.
SH4, like,
Woo. I know.
is it getting hot in here?
That's like the gif of the guy, the pilot sweating into it. But aye, or just general kind of good maintenance. It's just like if you want stuff to last, just look after it, and maybe some people are of the opinion, I'll just use it, and if it breaks, I'll get another one. That's fine, but just look after your gear. There's just these things, as I said, they're getting on, getting old. I don't know if like the retro consoles age in dog years, like.
Mate, do you remember the first episode of Bad Influence? So
Oh, I'd be lying if it's
the
no.
first episode of Bad Influence, old Andy Grain comes on and goes, we'll be covering things like the Mega Drive and the brand new Super Nintendo, and even old relics like this. Blows the dust off a BBC Micro. And a BBC Micro at that point, this old relic covered in dust, was 10 years old. Was I think less than 10 years old at the time.
Do they call a 10-year-old computer a relic? We're sitting here.
These days, you say a 10-year-old console is a retro, you'll get lambasted on social media.
My God, that's terrifying, mate. Here we are,
Mate, the
like 30 years of Saturn. Mad, mad. Where is
PS
that gone?
PS4 is 11 years old.
So I say, well, whenever Xbox 360 hits, 20 years old, that'll be December next year.
Next year,
And
mate.
yeah, so the scary thing about that is I met my wife like the month after I got my 360. So like my relationship with my wife is like tied in terms of time to the Xbox 360. So it's like people go, Xbox 360 is 20 years old next year. I'm like, fucking hell, I've been with my wife for nearly 20 years. Where's that went? It's like scary stuff.
So before we were recording, I was telling James about the fact that I'm having to take my son's Elite controller that he swindled me basically. He wanted to sell it to me, sold it to me for 50 quid, and the thing was completely busted. So still trying to find parts for it, and I've had to order some stuff off AliExpress. But I was telling my son this. The reason why my plans to fix that controller have been accelerated is because my trusty Xbox 360 wired controller that I use for my PC gaming has stick drift. After all this time, it has stick drift, and it would really killed a lot of my playing with Sonic X Shadow Generations recently, to the point where I just couldn't play it anymore with that controller. So that controller it's been retired to the drawer. I really don't want to get rid of it. The point I was going to make is I told my son I got that controller in 2006. He's like, wow, that's a year before I was born. And he's 17 next month. And it's like, oh my God. Since I bought that controller, someone born on the day of that controller can probably legally buy a drink.
Terrifying, mate. Just might as well just pick our grave plots just now, man. It's like get on the phone to the co-op. Hello, is that co-op funeral care? Sega guys here. It's like
I
bloody hell,
remember
man.
I remember distinctly picking it up. But it picked it up because I picked up Gears of War, SmackDown versus Raw 2006. SmackDown versus Raw 2007. And got the wired controllers. I had two wireless ones. I got the wired one because we wanted to do some free player SmackDown versus Raw. Of course we did. And good times, mate. Good times.
No, man. I was standing in the queue also to pick my console up at Game Station. I met a guy that I used to go to school with. Hadn't seen him in like what, about 10 years or something. A guy called Tony Cummings. Hadn't seen him in like since school days, and he just popped up in the queue at Game Station buying his Xbox 360. Madness, mate. Good times getting PGR3 home to still hear that menu music. Brilliant, man. Great days. Great days. What a system. But
What a system. Yeah. I mean, Sega Saturn's at the top, but the Xbox 360 in my top 5 consoles, it's mostly Sega, but the Xbox 360 is in there. What a
that's a hell of
console.
a machine. Even allowing for Red Ring of Death, like the fact that we tolerated that, it goes to show how good it was. Like that's peak Xbox for me, the 360. Like
Yeah,
they were just the first 3 years of it anyway. I think the Peter Moore, Don Matrick, Jay Allard, I think that no Don Matrick, Robbie Back, Peter Moore,
yeah,
Robbie Back, and Jay Allard. Those three guys like were just they just that first 3 years of 360. It was just the system to have, man. They just nailed. I think because we were the core demographic, mate. We were like
yeah,
days we were, man. It just spoke to us as gamers. But I was in just kind of total caveat here. I was in Morrison's earlier buying pumpkins, right? There you go, because it is Halloween, and I walked by what was the media section, a couple of DVDs, some CDs, and the games bit was just all gift cards, like credit,
yeah.
like 5 and 10 for like Xbox Live and or Xbox Store and PSN cards and Nintendo Switch E Store, and I'm like, man, remember the days you just walked into a shop and it was wall to wall cases, and you spend half an hour just picking up cases and looking at the back and
Yeah.
reading it, and
Well,
man, God's sake, we're relics, mate. Never mind the consoles.
yeah. So unfortunately, you can't stick an ODE in us and just have us running like normal. You know. You talk about
Like
changing powers. Go on.
the Transformers, repair, Teletran 1.
Yeah, you talk about changing the power supply. We needed to change our power supply to to lower cholesterol.
Mate, I take a tablet every day for my power supplies, call for high
Yeah.
blood pressure.
Oh dear.
Bloody
Oh
hell.
dear. So yeah, maybe that's why we love the system so much, mate. It's aging like us.
That's it. Like I say, it's like fine wine, but the grey hairs might disagree.
But yeah, I mean, waxing about the Xbox 360 now, but the Sega Saturn is number one, and I think the key is if you've got a Sega Saturn, that's the way you want to go with this. You want to look after it, maybe stick an ODE in there, various options to keep that going, and just make sure that your PSU is up to snuff. And stay tuned to the Sega guys on Sega Saturn Shiro for all the uh, all the latest updates on the Sega Saturn scene. And yeah, that's pretty much it, mate. I mean, it's been great talking through this, especially these AliExpress Saturns, because I did feel like it's something that does need to be addressed to kind of stem the tide against that.
Aye.
But yeah, as we lead into kind of Saturn season around the console's 30th birthday, next episode should be the big celebration of its 30th anniversary. Um, but yeah, what console?
What a machine, mate. What a machine. It has brought us together to create this very channel. You know what I mean? The Saturn is the
Has
catalyst, for what you're watching now. But yeah, November's going to be great fun. The month of Saturn. We've got content here. We're also going to be on the Sega Lounge with KC and Rav as well, celebrating Saturn's 30th on there. We've got kind of short videos as well to accompany the podcast. So November is going to be Saturn month on the Sega guys, and rightly so.
Indeed, indeed. So yeah, love to hear what your thoughts are all about. ODEs. What do you think of the AliExpress Saturns? Are we a way off base? Are we gatekeeping? Just let us know. Let us know in the comments below or on the Sega Guys Discord. You can get amongst the chat in there. If you've enjoyed this discussion, please give us a like and a subscribe and hit that bell for notifications. Not only do you have this fortnightly podcast, but we have a host of short videos, news, reviews, retrospectives, all sorts of stuff, which I think is going along quite well. We're managing to get it out very regularly. We'll have at least a video every Monday, but we tend to get maybe one or two out in between there and as well. So plenty of coming. And if you want to be extra mega, think about becoming a member from as little as 99p. You get a bunch of awesome little extras in there. Even more content if you're a premium member, and you also get your name read out at the close of the show, just like James is doing right now.
Certainly, mate. Our premium members for today's episode, we have G-Man, we have Stiff Peaks, I Am Mikowski, Craig Williamson, Resident SD, P-Wall, Tom Fum, Peter007, Andy Mackey, Nick Tulloch, and our good friends at Sega Saturn Shiro. So thank you very much to all of our members and subscribers for your continued support. Now on our way to 8,500 subscribers. Can we get to 10 for the end of 2024? That would be phenomenal in just over 2 years on the channel. So, we do hope you are enjoying what we're putting out. We feel as if we're getting more and more stuff out there. As we said in the recent channel, trailer that you did, Dan, we do it all, mate. We do it all. And the reason why we do it all is with your continued support, guys. So thank you very much. And if a monthly thing isn't, monthly subscription's not your thing, no problem at all. We appreciate you regardless of how you share and interact with our content. It's all about community here at the Sega Guys.
Yeah, that's the thing, there's various ways to support us, and even just sitting here with us listening or watching right now is giving us support, and we can't be thankful enough. Truly grateful and humbled by your continued support. But that's all going to be it for now, and until next time, it's been Dan the Mega Driver and James the Segaaholic, and we will see you on the Sega side.
Sega!